Why did you do this?
Turbulence happens. Can't predict it.
The flight attendant spilled tomato juice all over his body. He says, "Why did you do this?" She looked down at the red stain spreading across his body. And then she said 5 words that changed everything. Turbulence happens. Can't predict it. She laughs, and she just walked away. He sat there, soaked, humiliated, invisible. This is the story of how one spilled drink exposed a billion-dollar company's darkest secret. But before I tell you what happened next, if you've ever been treated like you didn't matter, hit that like button right now. Comment "respect" if you believe every passenger deserves dignity. And subscribe because stories like this need to be told. Now, let me take you back to where this all started. David Cross stood alone in his corner office on the 41st floor, the Phoenix skyline stretching beneath him like scattered embers against the desert darkness. His assistant had left 3 hours ago. The building hummed with emptiness. On his desk sat the quarterly report for Pinnacle Airlines, the carrier he had built from 2 leased aircraft and a dream into a respected regional powerhouse. Revenue up 23%, customer retention scores at 89%. Aviation analysts were calling him a visionary leader. He should have felt victorious. Instead, his eyes kept drifting back to a single email buried in his customer feedback portal. It had been forwarded by his VP of Customer Experience with a brief note, "Handled internally with team discussion." David had nearly deleted it. Nearly. But something in the subject line stopped him cold. "Your airline forgot who I was." The message came from a woman named Patricia in Denver. She wrote that she had flown Pinnacle twice within 2 weeks. The first time, she wore business professional attire returning from a corporate conference. The second time, she wore yoga pants and a sweatshirt coming back from visiting her daughter at college. She said the flight attendants treated her like 2 completely different human beings. In her suit, she received smiles, assistance, and acknowledgement. In her casual clothes, she became invisible, an inconvenience. David read it 5 times. Then he stood, pulled his phone from his pocket, and opened the Pinnacle booking application. He scrolled past the executive charter options, past business class selections, and clicked on a narrow economy seat for tomorrow's afternoon flight to Miami. Seat 14A, window seat. No extra legroom, no priority boarding privileges. He entered his own name, David Cross. No corporate designation, no account number, just another traveler. He studied his reflection in the dark window glass. Tomorrow, he would discover if Patricia was wrong, or if he had been blind to his own company's reality. The next afternoon, David dressed in faded denim jeans, a worn gray hoodie, and scuffed canvas sneakers he had not touched in years. No expensive watch, no leather briefcase. Just a plain olive green backpack containing a change of clothes and a book. He ordered a standard rideshare to Phoenix Sky Harbor International instead of using the company car service. He walked through the sliding glass doors into the fluorescent bright terminal and merged into the current of travelers hauling luggage and balancing coffee cups. Nobody gave him a second glance. He joined the economy check-in line. It snaked backward toward the terminal entrance, moving in irregular jerks. A father ahead of him wrestled with an uncooperative stroller while his toddler screamed. A college student wearing headphones dozed while standing upright. David watched a gate agent 20 yards away warmly greet a businessman in an expensive suit and personally guide him toward the priority services lane. When David finally reached the automated kiosk, the agent barely made eye contact. She scanned his identification, printed his boarding pass mechanically, and said, "Gate D14. Boarding starts at 3:40. Next in line." David took the pass and walked toward the security checkpoint. He waited in yet another line, removed his shoes and belt, placed his backpack in a gray plastic bin, watched a woman in designer clothing stroll through the pre-check lane without removing anything. David said nothing. He was conducting an experiment. So far, the hypothesis was proving disturbingly accurate. At gate D14, passengers clustered around charging outlets and overpriced breakfast kiosks. David found an empty seat near the floor-to-ceiling windows and watched the Pinnacle Airlines aircraft pull smoothly up to the jetway. The logo he had personally designed 9 years ago gleamed bright on the tail fin. He felt a momentary flicker of pride, then deliberately pushed it aside. Pride was not why he was here today. Boarding began with business-class passengers and families traveling with small children, then zones 2 through 4. David was zone 3. He stood in line behind a teenager wearing a basketball jersey and ahead of an older gentleman clutching a pharmacy bag. The gate agent scanned boarding passes with mechanical precision, her smile appearing and vanishing like a camera shutter. David stepped into the jetway. The air smelled like recycled jet fuel and industrial cleaning solution. At the aircraft entrance stood 2 flight attendants. The first was a woman in her early 40s with sharply styled chestnut hair pulled into an immaculate bun. Her name tag read Rachel Montgomery. The second was younger, with kind brown eyes and a naturally warm presence. Her tag said Isabella Torres. Rachel glanced at David's boarding pass as he approached. Her eyes swept quickly over his hoodie, his worn backpack, his completely unremarkable appearance. She said curtly, "Keep it moving, please," and gestured vaguely toward the cabin interior. Isabella, standing just behind her colleague, caught David's eyes and smiled genuinely. "Welcome aboard Pinnacle Airlines," she said softly. David nodded and stepped into the narrow cabin. The aisle was crowded and chaotic. Passengers struggled with overhead bins. A man in a button-down shirt shoved an oversized roller bag into a compartment already 3/4 full. David reached row 14 and paused. His backpack would not fit in the overhead bin. He tried positioning it lengthwise. It caught on someone else's luggage and would not slide in. Rachel walked past, scanning the rows with practiced efficiency. She saw David struggling with his bag. Her eyes passed over him without slowing down. She continued forward to greet a woman in business class with a bright, rehearsed smile and asked if she needed help storing her coat. David felt a presence beside him. Isabella reached up and gently repositioned 2 bags in the overhead compartment, creating just enough space. She took David's backpack and slid it in smoothly. "There you go, sir," she said kindly. "You are all set." "Thank you very much," David said quietly. She smiled again, this time with warmth that felt completely genuine, and moved down the aisle to assist other passengers. David slid into seat 14A, the window seat. A middle-aged woman in the middle seat was already absorbed in a paperback novel. A young man in the aisle seat typed rapidly on his phone. David buckled his seatbelt and settled into the narrow space. He was invisible here, exactly as he had hoped to be. The cabin door sealed shut. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom system with the standard welcome message. Flight time approximately 3 hours and 17 minutes. Weather forecast clear. Relax and enjoy your flight. David did not relax. He watched everything. Rachel moved through the cabin performing her pre-flight safety checks. In business class, she leaned down conversationally to ask a passenger if his briefcase needed to be stowed. She laughed warmly at something he said. 2 rows later in economy, she told a man to place his bag completely under the seat in front of him with a tone that could freeze water. The aircraft pushed back from the gate. The engines roared to life with familiar power. David felt the surge of acceleration as they taxied toward the runway. Moments later, they were airborne, Phoenix shrinking beneath them into a grid of highways and subdivisions sprawling across the desert. 25 minutes into the flight, the seatbelt sign chimed off. Rachel and Isabella began beverage service, rolling a metal cart from the front of the cabin. David watched Rachel stop at row 6. She smiled warmly at a businessman and asked what he would like to drink. He requested bourbon. She poured it carefully into a plastic cup, handed it to him with both hands, and said, "Please let me know if you need anything else at all." By the time she reached row 14, her smile had thinned into a flat line. She looked in David's general direction without making eye contact. "Drink?" she said flatly. "Just water, please," David said politely. She sighed almost inaudibly and said, "We will get to you shortly." She pushed the cart past him. David waited. 6 minutes passed. The woman beside him received ginger ale. The young man in the aisle seat got black coffee. Rachel turned the cart around and started back up the aisle toward the front. David still had no water. Isabella appeared moments later carrying a bottle of water. "I sincerely apologize for the wait," she said gently, handing it to him with a small napkin. "Here you are, sir." "Thank you," David said, meeting her eyes briefly. She nodded warmly and continued back toward the galley. 50 minutes into the flight, the aircraft hit a patch of light turbulence. Nothing dangerous, just enough to rattle the cabin slightly. Rachel was pouring tomato juice 3 rows ahead when the plane dipped unexpectedly. The cup in her hand tilted sharply forward. Red liquid splashed across David's lap, soaking into his jeans and spreading across his left thigh. He flinched hard. The cold acidity bit into his skin through the fabric. Rachel straightened immediately, glanced down at the spreading stain, and said without emotion, "Turbulence happens. Can't predict it." Then she turned and continued moving down the aisle with the cart. David sat completely still, jaw muscles tight, tomato juice dripping slowly onto the seat cushion beneath him. The woman beside him glanced over with mild concern but said nothing. The young man in the aisle seat never looked up from his phone. Isabella appeared less than 30 seconds later, her face filled with genuine distress. She knelt slightly in the aisle and handed David a thick stack of white napkins. "I am so sorry, sir," she said earnestly. "That absolutely should not have happened." She pulled a small bottle of club soda from her uniform pocket. "This should help prevent the stain from setting." David took the napkins and pressed them firmly against his jeans. He looked directly into her eyes. "I appreciate that. Thank you," he said quietly. She hesitated for just a moment, then said, "I will bring you more napkins and another bottle of water immediately. And please, if you need anything else at all, do not hesitate to ask me directly." She returned 90 seconds later with both items. This time, she placed them carefully on his tray table herself. "I truly mean it," she said softly but firmly. "If you need anything, please let me know." David nodded slowly. He did not reveal who he was. He simply watched her walk back toward the galley area, shoulders square, treating him with the exact dignity he had designed his airline to embody. 12 minutes later, Rachel's voice crackled over the cabin PA system. Her tone was smooth and professional, but with an edge sharp enough to draw blood. "Ladies and gentlemen, we sincerely appreciate passengers who understand that our crew works extremely hard and who follow instructions promptly. It makes the entire flight experience smoother for everyone on board. Thank you for your cooperation and understanding." The words hung in the recycled air like a veiled accusation. Several passengers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. David's hands tightened slowly around the armrests. He knew exactly who that announcement was aimed toward. Not him specifically by name, but people like him. People she had decided did not warrant her full attention or respect. From his angle near the window, David could see partially into the forward galley area. Isabella stood near the beverage counter, arms folded across her chest. Rachel was beside her, reorganizing plastic cups and napkins. David could not hear their exact words, but he could read Isabella's body language clearly. She said something brief and pointed. Rachel responded with a dismissive wave of her hand. Then Rachel's voice, quieter now but still clearly audible, drifted into the cabin through the open galley curtain. "You will learn eventually, Isabella. Some passengers simply matter more than others in the real world. That is just how it works in this industry. Isabella looked down at the floor. She did not respond verbally. David closed his eyes slowly. He had heard enough, more than enough. The remainder of the flight passed in tense silence. David did not request anything else. He did not need to gather any more evidence. He had boarded this aircraft searching for the truth about his company's real culture, and he had found it. Not in policy manuals or quarterly training reports, but in a spilled cup of tomato juice and a sentence spoken carelessly in a galley when no one important was supposed to be listening. The plane began its gradual descent through cloudless skies. The sprawling lights of Miami spread out below like a luminous web stretching toward the ocean. The landing gear deployed with a heavy thunk. The wheels touched down smoothly on the runway. Passengers immediately began standing and retrieving bags from overhead bins before the seatbelt sign even turned off. David remained seated calmly. Rachel stood near the exit door, thanking departing passengers with her polished, professional smile firmly back in place. Isabella stood quietly beside her, hands folded respectfully in front of her. As the cabin slowly emptied, David finally stood. He slung his olive green backpack over one shoulder and walked deliberately up the aisle. Rachel glanced at him as he approached. Her smile flickered momentarily, but held. "Thank you for choosing Pinnacle Airlines today," she said automatically. David stepped into the jetway. And that is precisely when he saw them waiting. Standing just beyond the aircraft door were 3 people in crisp business attire. One of them was Regional Operations Director Samuel Hayes, a man David had personally recruited and promoted 4 years ago. Beside him stood 2 senior operations managers David recognized immediately from corporate headquarters. They were absolutely not here by accident or coincidence. Samuel stepped forward professionally. His face was composed and respectful. "Mr. Cross," he said clearly and formally. The jetway went completely silent. Behind David, Rachel froze mid-smile. The color drained rapidly from her face. Isabella's eyes widened dramatically, confusion transforming slowly into dawning realization. David turned slightly so both flight attendants could see him clearly and directly. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to raise his voice. "Rachel," he said calmly and evenly, "I would like to have a conversation with you for a few minutes." She opened her mouth, closed it without speaking, then nodded stiffly with visible tension. David gestured toward a quieter corner section of the jetway. Samuel and the operations managers stepped back respectfully to give them space. Isabella stood rooted in place, completely uncertain whether to stay or leave. David gave her a small, deliberate nod. "You as well, Isabella. Please join us." The 3 of them moved to the side of the jetway. The final stragglers from the flight filed past, glancing back with open curiosity. David looked directly at Rachel. She refused to meet his eyes, staring instead at the jetway floor. "I want to walk through exactly what happened on this flight," David said in a measured, calm tone, "because I need to be absolutely certain I understand the situation correctly." Rachel's jaw tightened visibly. "Sir, I did not—" "When I boarded this aircraft," David continued steadily and precisely, "you told me to keep moving without offering any assistance whatsoever. You did not help when I struggled to fit my bag in the overhead compartment. During beverage service, you told me you would get to me shortly, but you never did. When juice spilled directly on me, you walked away without any apology. You made a public announcement implying that certain passengers were being difficult, and in the galley, you explicitly told a colleague that some passengers matter more than others." Each sentence landed with the weight of documented evidence. Rachel's hands began trembling noticeably. "I didn't know who you were," she said, her voice rising slightly with panic. "I had no idea that you were—" "That was precisely and exactly the point of this exercise," David said, quietly but firmly. Heavy silence filled the jetway. You treated me the way you did because you made an assumption that I did not matter, David said. Because you genuinely believed that no one would notice your behavior. No one would care about how you treated me. He paused deliberately. That tells me absolutely everything I need to know about what you truly believe this airline represents. Rachel's face flushed deep red with a mixture of shame and anger. I have worked for Pinnacle Airlines for 11 years. I have never received a single formal complaint in my entire— You have been excellent and attentive to passengers you personally judged as important or valuable, David interrupted calmly. I am quite certain your performance reviews reflect that consistently. But at Pinnacle Airlines, every single passenger matters equally and deserves equal respect. Or none of them do. He turned to Samuel. Rachel is suspended immediately, effective right now, pending a complete and thorough HR investigation. I want a comprehensive analysis of all passenger feedback associated with her flights over the past 18 months. Samuel nodded once. Understood completely, sir. Rachel's eyes filled rapidly with tears, but David did not soften his expression or his stance. Compassion, yes. Understanding, perhaps. But accountability came first and foremost. Then David turned deliberately to Isabella. Her expression remained cautious and uncertain. You helped me stow my bag without being asked, David said. You brought me napkins and club soda immediately. You apologized sincerely for something that was absolutely not your fault or responsibility. And when your colleague explicitly told you that some passengers deserve more attention than others, you disagreed with her. Isabella blinked rapidly. I honestly just think we should treat everyone the way we would want to be treated ourselves. David smiled faintly for the first time. That is precisely right. He glanced at Samuel. I want Isabella directly involved in completely redesigning our customer service training curriculum. Her instincts and her actions perfectly reflect what we should be modeling and teaching. Isabella looked genuinely stunned. Sir, I do not know if I am qualified or experienced enough to— You are far more qualified than you realize, David said firmly. You did what was right when it would have been significantly easier to do nothing. That is exactly what we need to be teaching every employee. Isabella nodded slowly, visible emotion flickering across her face. Thank you, sir. I will do my absolute best. Marcus nodded once. That is all anyone can reasonably ask. He walked past them into the busy terminal. Samuel followed closely behind. Behind them in the jetway, Rachel stood frozen and devastated, and Isabella stood beside her, still processing everything that had just happened in the last 5 minutes. David did not look back. 2 hours later, David sat alone in a quiet corner of the Pinnacle Airlines Executive Lounge at Miami International Airport. He had politely declined offers of dinner meetings, phone briefings, and status updates. He simply needed silence and space to think. He thought about Patricia's email, about the woman in yoga pants who had become invisible to his staff. He thought about the father struggling with the screaming toddler and broken stroller, the college student dozing in line, the elderly gentleman clutching his pharmacy bag. He thought about how remarkably easy it is to build something with good intentions and simply assume it operates the way you originally designed it. How physical and emotional distance creates dangerous blind spots. How quarterly reports measure revenue growth and fuel efficiency and on-time performance statistics, but never measure human dignity or respect. He pulled out his phone and opened his notes application. He began typing slowly and deliberately. A company's true culture is not defined by what we say in boardroom presentations or write in mission statements. It is defined by what happens in seat 14A when absolutely no one is watching. 3 weeks later, David stood on stage in front of 600 Pinnacle Airlines employees gathered in the main auditorium at corporate headquarters in Phoenix. Gate agents, flight attendants, pilots, baggage handlers, maintenance technicians, customer service representatives, cleaning crews. The people who made the airline actually function every single day. He did not stand behind a protective podium. He walked onto the stage carrying a wireless microphone and stood directly in the center under the bright lights. "I want to tell you all about a flight I took very recently," he began simply. He told them the complete story, not to publicly humiliate Rachel, whose name he deliberately did not mention, but to illustrate a critical point. He described the unequal treatment in detail, the spilled juice, the passive-aggressive announcement, the wordsins spoken carelessly in the galley. "I personally heard someone on our team say that some passengers deserve more attention than others," David said clearly. "And I realized in that moment that if even one single person working for this company believes that, then we have fundamentally failed as an organization." The massive auditorium was completely silent. The real measure of Pinnacle Airlines is not how well we treat our premium members or our most frequent business travelers, David continued with intensity. It is how we treat the person sitting in seat 14A, the person nobody recognizes or knows, the person who might never fly with us again. That person deserves exactly the same respect, exactly the same care, exactly the same dignity as anyone else on that aircraft. He paused to let that sink in. We are going to do significantly better, starting immediately, right now, today. He announced sweeping changes, comprehensive empathy-based training for every single customer-facing employee, unannounced executive observations on random flights and at service counters, completely revised performance evaluation criteria that would heavily incorporate direct passenger feedback, a fundamental cultural transformation built entirely on one foundational principle: every seat matters equally. And he announced that Isabella Torres, a flight attendant who had been with Pinnacle Airlines for only 14 months, would co-lead the complete redesign of the company's customer service training program. The auditorium erupted in sustained, thunderous applause. After the meeting concluded, Isabella found David in the corridor outside the auditorium. She looked nervous and overwhelmed. "Mr. Cross, I am honestly not sure I have enough experience or knowledge to—" "You have exactly the experience and knowledge we need most," David interrupted gently. "You treated someone with genuine respect when it would have been easier to ignore them completely. That is precisely what we need to teach." She nodded slowly, absorbing his words. "I will do everything I possibly can. That is all I am asking." 5 weeks later, David boarded another Pinnacle Airlines flight. This time, he sat in business class, not because he wanted comfort or luxury, but because he wanted to observe the entire operation from a different vantage point. He watched flight attendants greet economy passengers with the same warmth and attention they showed business class travelers. He saw a crew member kneel patiently to help a nervous first-time flyer fasten their seatbelt correctly. He saw another attendant proactively offer a blanket to an elderly woman before she even asked. It was not perfect yet. Real change never is. But it was unmistakably, measurably different. David looked out the small window as the aircraft climbed steadily through layers of white clouds. Somewhere far below, another passenger sat in seat 14A. Perhaps they wore faded jeans and an old hoodie. Perhaps nobody on that flight knew their name or occupation. But they mattered. And now, finally, everyone at Pinnacle Airlines genuinely understood that fundamental truth. If this story reminded you that how we treat people when absolutely nobody is watching reveals who we truly are, go ahead and hit that like button right now. Drop a comment below and tell me about a time someone showed you unexpected kindness, or share a moment when you realized you needed to treat people better than you had been. And make sure you subscribe to this channel because we are just getting started with stories that challenge how we think about leadership, character, and doing what is right, even when it costs us something significant. Thanks for watching and being here. I will see you in the next one.